Filters are undoubtedly one of the most important accessories for your drone, and with such great importance also comes confusion. By filters, I don't mean the edits that you apply to your Instagram photos. I'm talking about actual pieces of glass that go in front of the lens. With that being said, I figured I would dedicate an entire video to explaining some of their uses. Now before we start this video off, let's briefly go over some of the different kinds of filters that are available. First is the standard UV filter. Next is the polarizer filter, which you may be familiar with if you have ever owned a pair of polarized sunglasses. And finally the ND filter, which may be one of the most popular choices amongst drone enthusiasts. If you're just here for a specific set of filters, I'll put the timestamps on the screen as well as in the description to easily jump around the video. The example footage shot for today will be taken on the Phantom 4 Pro, and I'll also put a little tag up on the screen that shows you some of the different camera settings used for each individual clip, and it's going to look something like this, so look out for that if you're interested. Starting things off, we have our stock UV filter. A UV filter, short for ultraviolet, reduces the amount of ultraviolet light that is allowed to reach the sensor. This was much more important with older film cameras as they were more sensitive to UV light. But with today's digital sensors, we do not have to worry about this as much. One of these is included with your drone and can be easily screwed off to expose the bare camera. This is not the case with the Mavic as it is built into the actual camera housing itself. Aside from blocking the ultraviolet light, this filter also provides a protection or a protective layer for the actual camera. Not having one of these covering your camera is dangerous as a scratch to the glass on the camera itself is permanent and could be a hefty price to fix. Different companies sell their own versions of UV filters for your drone. Here is a quick comparison in price for the Phantom 4 Pro across two of the major drone accessory brands, DJI and Polar Pro. If you have a UV filter that is scratched up from daily use, you may want to look into purchasing another one. While it may seem like an expensive item to replace, it sure does beat having no protection for your camera, which could lead to possible damage. Next up we have the PL filter. A PL filter, short for polarizer, decreases glare while lightly increasing saturation across the image. As I said earlier in this video, you may be familiar with a lens like this if you own a pair of polarized sunglasses. For my testing, I wanted to compare the glare reduction. Here is the first shot of me flying over a small pond with the stock UV filter applied from DJI. I've got to say, for the most part, it really doesn't look all that bad, and there really isn't any glare to actually eliminate. Here is the same shot but with the polarizer filter applied. I noticed a slight difference, but nothing that really impressed me. When we play the clips side by side, the glare reduction is more apparent, so I guess it did get the job done. Maybe I didn't do this testing in the right conditions, but next time when you're on the water, you can give this a try to see if your footage turns out better. Maybe if you're somewhere out on like the ocean where there's a lot of sunlight and a lot of glare from a huge body of water, it'll make somewhat of a difference, but for me, when I was a little bit higher up, I didn't notice the biggest difference. With polarizer filters, you can usually spin them to get a different look that changes the color of the sky as well as the overall saturation. After almost 30 seconds of rotation, I noticed no difference. Again, this could just be my set of filters that I'm using, but I stopped just because I didn't want to do any damage to my gimbal. Aside from everything that I already mentioned, a polarizer filter also adds a small amount of tint, reducing the light by about 1.5 f-stops. This is not as significant as an ND filter, which is the next piece of glass that I will cover. An ND filter, short for neutral density, stops light from reaching the sensor as the glass is tinted. Different levels of tint can be measured by simple numbers, which increase as the tint becomes darker. To better understand why we would need an ND filter, we first need to explain the camera settings. The three pillars of photography are ISO, shutter speed, and aperture, all of which you may be familiar with if you've messed around with your drone's camera settings in the past. ISO measures your camera's sensitivity to light. Shutter speed measures how long your shutter will be open to expose the camera's sensor to light, and aperture measures the size of the hole that allows light into the camera. As our ISO value increases, so does the brightness of our image. As the speed of our shutter increases, the brightness begins to decrease. And as our aperture increases, the brightness also begins to decrease. Adjustable aperture is only available on the Phantom 4 Pro and the Phantom 4 Advanced with their brand new cameras, so if you own a Mavic or a Phantom 3 series drone, you will not see this setting. Before we get into the optimal settings used with a ND filter, we first need to go over the 180-degree shutter rule. This rule basically states that when shooting video, we want our shutter speed to be twice the amount of our frame rate. For example, if we are shooting in 30 frames per second, our shutter speed should be 60. If we are shooting at a higher frame rate, let's say 60 frames per second, our shutter speed should be a value of 120. Following this rule gives us the perfect amount of motion blur when we are filming. This rule is fairly subjective, and different shutter speed values can give you a different style that you may be looking for, but for optimal results, I would suggest following it. Here are some quick examples that I shot outside. For various different shutter speeds, I waved my hand in front of the camera to compare how moving objects look. First up is the ND8 filter with a shutter speed of 60. This is right where we want to be, as the slower shutter speed adds just the right amount of motion blur for the shot to look natural. Again, with the ND8 filter, I toned down the shutter speed to 30, which just makes the footage look way too blurry. Try to avoid this at all costs, unless of course you are trying to go for this look in your video. This next shot is with the stock UV filter with a shutter speed of 640. Our result is less than optimal, as it looks almost fake, like I may be a robot or something. Finally, with the UV filter on, I dialed up the ISO to 800, which allowed me to bring the shutter speed all the way up to 3200. It may look grainy because of the high ISO value, but you get the point. This footage looks very unnatural. Maybe if you're filming something like a sporting event, you may want to use like a higher shutter speed or something that's just high action, but certainly not for cinematic shooting. In a 4-way comparison, it may be hard to tell the difference right off the bat, but when I freeze the frames, you can see the effect of the high shutter speed. With the higher shutter speed, it looks like the hand is just being held there, but with the lower shutter speeds, we'll notice that it's just a blurry mess. From these tests, we can conclude that using a shutter speed that is 2 times the frame rate is without a doubt better looking than footage shot at a higher shutter speed, especially for cinematic shooting. In order to achieve this lower shutter speed during the bright sunlight, we need to be using an ND filter, because without that, our footage will be way too overexposed. Now you may be wondering just which ND filter you should be using, and for that I've devised a graph. All the information that you see here has been gathered from PolarPro's website, which I think is a perfect way to decide which ND filter you need to use. I'll put the link down in the description if you want to check out their website. Now I'm not going to sit here and read all this off to you. I know that you guys can read. If you'd like, you can pause this real quick, take a screenshot, and refer to it later. But just right now I'm going to describe how I came across, or how I kind of made this graph. So first of all, on the left side we have the actual filter, like the ND4, 8, 16, 32, or 64. I know that there are more out there available, like it goes all the way up to I think around ND1000 for long exposure photography, but I just included these just because they are the most popular lenses that you can purchase on the market right now. Also, I included the f-stop on there, just in case you guys were interested in that. And then also on the right side, for the optimal conditions, I put like the actual weather condition outside, whether it's dawn, dusk, sunny, cloudy, all of that good stuff. And then again, I also put the shutter speed value that you may be shooting at. So if you have that stock lens on with no tint whatsoever, and you're shooting at a shutter speed of 250, you're going to want to apply an ND4 filter to get the best results. So you may need to just begin with the actual UV filter on, take off, see what the light is looking outside, and then land and reattach some sort of filter to make sure you're getting the best results. A benefit to using the Phantom 4 Pro and Advanced is the adjustable aperture, which allows us to really dial into the exact exposure value that we want. While it may not ruin your footage by adjusting the shutter speed around just a little bit, I still love the results that come from the 180-degree shutter rule. Now, if it was hard for you to choose between a polarizer and a neutral density filter, don't worry, as it just got a lot easier. Companies like Freewell and PolarPro have recently designed specific pieces of glass that give you the benefit of a polarizer and a neutral density filter all in one package. This filter will block glare from the water and let you lower the shutter speed to coordinate with the 180-degree shutter rule. These tend to be a little more expensive depending on the company that you choose to buy them from, but without a doubt will give you some great looking results. In conclusion, all of the filters that I went over in this video give you some sort of added benefit, even that stock UV filter. I've still got to say my go-to is the ND/PL filter. It gives you all of the added benefits in one package. But guys, anyway, that about wraps up this video. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you are new around here, as I have been trying to upload daily. Also, leave me a comment down below letting me know what kind of filter you like to use, as well as the brand, as I know there are plenty out there. But guys, anyway, as I said, this video is coming to an end, and as always, I'll talk to you later. Peace.